Lupino ran his racket of sex, drugs, and contract killings from a sleazy hotel in a slum block of tenements. The NYPD was closing in. I could hear the sirens. Their wail was a crescendo. Lupino thought he could get us by taking Alex out and leaving me to take the fall for it. All he had gotten was my attention.
I've always had a soft spot for a good noir story. I'm not sure what exactly attracts me the most to this genre. The moody, cynical, metaphor-laden narration, the sleaze and filth of the urban hellholes where these stories are usually set, the themes which revolve around the cyclical nature of corruption that no matter how much the protagonist struggles to break, it's all for nothing in the end. My fascination for noir goes way back to when I was a kid, to a time when I didn't even register it as a specific genre. My mom had a thing for hard-boiled novels, which were really hard to come by in communist Romania. Once the Iron Curtain fell and these books started popping up in the improvised market stalls that stood for bookstores in the early 90s, my mom went on a years-long buying spree. If the cover had a revolver or a fedora-wearing detective, she bought it. So growing up I had access to a home library brimming with hard-boiled novels from a plethora of authors of varying degrees of notoriety. I'm talking classic authors such as Dashiell Hammett, Raymond Chandler, Edgar Wallace, Carol John Daly, James M. Cain, Mickey Spillane, and some really obscure ones like Peter Shaney and David Goodis. And I devoured these books like my life depended on it. These are books that I never should have been allowed to read. The gratuitous violence present in these books was definitely not kid-friendly, but they did teach me a valuable lesson from a young age. That the world is not as black and white as their film adaptations are, which I also remember watching and enjoying growing up. So what does all of this have to do with Max Payne? Well, everything really. You see, the games I consumed until I played Max Payne for the first time were very different from the books and movies I watched. I wouldn't say they were kid-friendly necessarily, but they didn't have as big of an emotional impact on my young, impressionable mind as the aforementioned books and movies. Until I played the original Max Payne. It was almost exactly like the hard-boiled novels I enjoyed reading. Obviously, I didn't possess the adequate level of media literacy to articulate exactly what tied them together, nor the maturity to fully absorb and understand the themes they were approaching, but man, I couldn't believe somebody made a game exactly like the books I loved. I don't know where I'm going with this anymore, so I'm gonna resort to just stating that I kind of grew up with this series. I've revisited these games multiple times throughout the years, and on each occasion I discovered new layers to their narrative and themes and even more reasons to love them. Not just because of their noir pedigree, but the fact that each entry attempted to push the limits of this medium in its own unique way. The first Max Payne literally set the tone for mature narrative-driven video games, at least in the AAA industry. The second game built on the foundations laid down by its predecessor, and doubled down on narrative, character study, and introspection. Max Payne 3 took the best elements from the first two games and sprinkled some social commentary on top. Not to mention bullet time and the creative ways the Max Payne games experiment with various storytelling devices, but all in due time. So for this video, I decided to take one more crack at these games and explore their themes, gameplay mechanics, and how they've changed over the years. The reason why I ended tackling the entire series in one video is pretty simple. Being narrative driven, the best way to fully absorb their themes and get immersed into their worlds is to consume them as a package. They're also quite short even with all the quick loads resulting from some pretty questionable design decisions. Plus, witnessing Max Payne's journey from ex-cop vigilante with nothing to lose to depressed NYPD detective who falls for the femme fatale to alcoholic middle-aged man on a path to self-destruction is all the more satisfying if you play them back to back, which is exactly what I did. And oh boy, what an emotional roller coaster it has been. Poor Max can't get a freaking break. Before we start, a little context for those of you who are new to this channel. This video is part of an irregular series of retrospectives where I take an entire series and pick it apart, stream of consciousness style, without thinking too much about structure. Don't worry, it's not entirely devoid of structure, but in my quest to touch on the highlights and deep dive into them without rambling incoherently, some major stuff will inevitably slip through the cracks. If you want a taste of what this series of videos is about, go check out my pieces on the Riddick franchise and Arcane Studios, which will be linked in the description. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already, hit that like button and the bell, and leave a comment with your thoughts. For the past month and a half I've been playing Max Payne, thinking about Max Payne, reading about Max Payne, writing about Max Payne, talking about Max Payne, dreaming about Max Payne. This video has consumed my soul, so I'd love to hear your feedback and whether you'd like to see more videos like this one. So yeah, I suck at transitioning between sections, so I'm gonna play it Bogart and shoot dodge straight into this monster of a video. Intro! The first entry in the series, developed by fledgling Finnish studio Remedy Entertainment and released in 2001, dropped in a time that could be described as the peak of angsty turn-of-the-millennium media. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Leather jackets, goth clubs, evil corporations, dark electro music. The real world, fresh off of the Y2K scare, was still following the exploits of Mulder and Scully. And Remedy Entertainment drew from all of those real-world anxieties, blended them with the tropes and conventions of noir, and produced a moody, hard-boiled narrative featuring organized crime, an unscrupulous pharmaceutical company, the US military, and a secret society, with Max Payne, a quick-witted, trigger-happy Sam Spade meets Dirty Harry ex-cop vigilante type at the center of it. Remedy even threw some occult imagery and Norse mythology in for good measure. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's take it one step at a time. The plot centers around Max Payne, a young NYPD cop. Max seems to be the epitome of the American dream. Good job, thriving social life, beautiful wife and newborn daughter, spacious and cozy house in the suburbs. Max basically has nothing to complain about. He made quite a life for himself. His life is so good that only a freak, life-shattering event of unimaginable tragic proportions could squander it. Surely the universe wouldn't be as cruel as to take all of that away from our boy Max in the span of a New York minute in the evening of August 22nd, 1998. Right?
No!
Yeah, well, hopefully they spared the baby, right? Oh. Fuck. So here's what happened. One late August evening, Max arrived home only to find his house ransacked. The cop in him immediately knew something was up. I guess his wife's cries for help and the ruckus from upstairs were dead giveaways. One esoteric graffiti and conveniently timed ominous phone call later, he shoots the intruders dead. The problem, Max was too late, as by the time he reached the source of the commotion upstairs, the manic, drug-frenzied junkies had already murdered his family. The investigation following this tragic event revealed that the junkies had been under the influence of Valkyr, a highly addictive synthetic drug that causes vivid hallucinations. After the funeral, Max transfers to the DEA, hoping to annihilate the organized crime groups trafficking the drug and clean the streets of New York of Valkyr once and for all. It took the DEA 3 grueling years of work to finally catch a break in the Valkyr case, when a police informer tipped them off that Jack Lupino, a capo regime in the Punchinello crime family, was trafficking. Max then goes undercover and infiltrates the ranks of the Punchinello crime family. However, what was supposed to be a by-the-books undercover sting turns really bad really fast. First, Max stumbles upon a bank heist while attempting to meet with Alex Balder, his old partner from the police force in the Roscoe Street station. There he shoots multiple Punchinello goons dead, outing himself as an undercover police officer in the process. Right after he met with Alex Balder, his partner is gunned down by an assassin and Max is framed for the murder. So, with the NYPD having declared him a dangerous vigilante and the Punchinello family having marked him for death respectively, Max decided to go on a one-man vendetta against the people responsible for Valkyr and the death of his best friend. Eventually, Max finds himself against forces greater than the random street goons he'd been gunning down, who'd just been pawns in a decade-spanning conspiracy involving the US government, a multinational pharmaceutical corporation, and a secret society composed of influential US politicians and businessmen. Man, only Max could be so unlucky. Poor dude just wanted to bust up a drug gang and call it a day. Of course, there's more to the plot than this, but I've already spoiled more than I should. Now is as good a time as any to talk about the presentation and its noir storytelling devices.
There he is! There he is! Billy!
Let's start with the graphic novel panels. Being one of the hallmarks of the series, I was quite amused when I found out that the graphic novel cutscenes were a quick workaround that Remedy whipped up to compensate for budget and technical limitations. When they started working on Max Payne, the technology wasn't quite powerful enough to help them make Max Payne as they envisioned it. A mature cinematic movie-like experience that audiences could take seriously. The graphic novel presentation was a compromise and not necessarily a product of their artistic vision. Ironically, this limitation was exactly what helped Max Payne stand out, even more so than the moody story and the violent gameplay. And I'm really happy that Remedy went for the graphic novels, because the few cutscenes that made it into the game are they're not very good. They're super awkward and amateurish. Remedy's lack of experience is especially visible in the character models and facial expressions. Hell, Max's goofy face has been the subject of heated debates and memes for the past 20 years at this point. You could argue that Max's eternally constipated smirk is a symbolic representation of the pain and trauma he's been subjected to over the course of the game, but that would be too much of a reach even for me. The dude who constantly reaches in his videos. Don't get me wrong, it's not like the graphic novels are impeccably produced. They do a great job at pushing the plot forward and setting the tone, but man, they ooze an endearing, overly ambitious student project vibe. Remedy didn't have the money to hire professional actors, so they brought their friends and family to model for the graphic novels alongside them. Max Payne's face, for example, was designed to Sam Lake's likeness, who served as the lead writer for the game. His mother and father modeled for Nicole Thorne, Acer Corporation CEO, and Alfred Woden, leader of the Inner Circle respectively. Marcos Aresto, lead singer and founder of Finnish rock band Poets of the Fall, acted as Vladimir Lem, the leader of the Russian mafia. His bandmate Olli Tukianen portrayed the twitchy and craven Punchinello capo Vinny Gagnidi. Speaking of the Punchinellos, do you know who modeled for Don Punchinello himself? Sam Lake's old apartment janitor, or at least according to the fandom wiki. I couldn't find any source for this, but I swear to god I read it in an interview years ago. While we're at it, I love how Jim Bravura's performer is listed as unknown, like literally no one knows who modeled for Max Payne's boss. Anyway, it's clear that all the people involved with this project had tons of fun dressing up as New York wise guys and corporate assassins. Oh man, what I wouldn't give for the opportunity to be a fly on the wall and watch these people give it their all. To be fair to Remedy, a lot of work went into recreating the vibe of a noir, sleazy, crime-ridden New York City. To make their in-game representation of New York as authentic as possible, 6 of their designers traveled to New York in 1999 to get some first-hand experience and take photographs for mapping. Now, you'd think they'd stick to photographing touristy locations and spend the rest of their stay fucking around in bars on the company's money, but no. You know what these madmen actually did? They hired 2 ex-NYPD bodyguards and went to the shadiest corners of the city during the night. They visited ex-crack houses, abandoned tenement buildings, and even explored the depths of the New York subway system, which they used as reference for the Roscoe Street Station mission. I love how in the blog recounting the trip, the author cheekily remarked that the cleaning efforts led by the then New York City's mayor, which involved boarding up abandoned buildings, made it really hard for them to find interesting abandoned buildings to photograph. Anyway, 2 stories from that blog stuck out to me. On the 5th day, they went to Crown Heights in Brooklyn and snuck inside the worst abandoned building they could find. One of the cops went ahead, gun pulled out, to check the perimeter while the group of designers was wading in used drug syringes and empty methadone jars. The coast seemed clear until a huge rabid dog appeared and lunged at them. Thankfully, they all escaped safely, so naturally they called it a day and went back to the hotel. Except they didn't. On that same fucking day they went to Little Odessa, the Russian neighborhood, where a group of thugs got super interested in their cameras. They escaped unharmed because, get this, one of the bodyguards opened his jacket and showed them that he was armed. And to top it all off, they did a slow drive-by past a known New York City Mafia hangout spot on that same fucking day. Fortunately, they were smart enough not to stop and take photos. There are some lines that even overly enthusiastic Remedy Entertainment designers won't cross. So, was this possibly needlessly dangerous trip to the seedy parts of New York City worth it? I'd say so, yeah. The graphic novel cutscenes definitely benefited stylistically from this approach, because Remedy Entertainment basically took the photos and altered them digitally to resemble watercolor drawings. The same thing applies to the in-game levels. One of the most common complaints about Max Payne is that the levels are devoid of variation and oomph, but I think that's kind of the point. The places that Max has to visit are not the most welcoming. So yeah, I'd say the levels are as varied as they should be considering the setting of the game. I love me some sweet urban decay. I wanna see all the dilapidated buildings and filthy crack houses in the world. Not in the real world though, that would remind me too much of where I live. There's a lot to admire in the small details they inserted in the levels as well, like Valkyr syringes littering the environments and the small street businesses in various states of decay. Of course, Remedy's CD version of New York is exaggerated for dramatic effect. It's closer to a 70s exploitation movie than the real thing, which was not exactly the prettiest place on Earth, but it was already gentrifying rapidly at the beginning of the millennium. The high point of the presentation is Max Payne's narration, without a single doubt.
Suddenly it all made sense. The bombs, the Russian mob boss making an appearance in person. Gognitti was his usual self, all talk and no walk. Outside, the mercury was falling fast. It was colder than the devil's heart, raining ice pitchforks as if the heavens were ready to fall. Everyone was running for shelter like there was no tomorrow. It didn't get any better when I got to the subway. There was something disturbingly familiar about the letter before me. The handwriting was all pretty curves.
You're in a computer game, Max.
The truth was a burning green crack through my brain, weapon statistics hanging in the air glimpsed out of the corner of my eye, endless repetition of the act of shooting, time slowing down to show off my moves, the paranoid feel of someone controlling my every step. I was in a computer game. Funny as hell, it was the most horrible thing I could think of. Even with all this firepower, I figured I couldn't get to Punchinello at his manor. I could only hope that he wouldn't pass a chance to hear me beg, to see he's won.
For Max's voice role, Remedy brought James McCaffrey, a little-known character actor who had made a career from playing small roles in shows and TV movies. Here's an interesting piece of trivia that contributes absolutely nothing to the video. On June 3rd, 2001, 1 month before the release of Max Payne, James McCaffrey made an episodic appearance in a little-known TV show called, wait for it, Sex and the City. But that wasn't the first time our boy James popped up in that show. 3 years before that, he played a different Sex and the City character called, wait for it, Max. Why do I know this? Excuse me? For your information, I'm what is known as a James McCaffrey scholar. This is definitely not information I dug up while skimming through his Wikipedia page looking for obscure trivia to insert in this video, so could he just like back off, and also this is none of the fucking business? I don't think it's too controversial to say that James McCaffrey's performance elevates Max Payne from a standard noir revenge story to something truly special. I'd even go as far as to say that James McCaffrey is one of the greatest talents the video game industry has ever seen. His delivery has a sort of timeless coolness quality to it, detached and matter-of-factly on the outside but burning with passion on the inside. As if Max had had some time to process the events that transpired during his quest for revenge and decided to stylishly recreate them through layered metaphors and razor-sharp, hard-boiled sarcastic quips. Moreover, the fact that the story is told retrospectively from Max's point of view instead of concurrently lends Max's narration with an almost authoritative weight. As in, I went through all this shit and I live to tell the story, so my glass of whiskey better not be empty until I finish. In my opinion, James McCaffrey's performance is the #1 reason why Max Payne ended up as a truly complex and layered character on his own, instead of a stock noir character. He managed to bring life to Max's many quirks and idiosyncrasies, his penchant for metaphors, his no-nonsense, nothing-to-lose attitude, and his ability to spit out wisecracks even in the face of potentially mortal danger. Max is a master of his environment. He's intimately familiar with the filth and corruption of the city's underbelly, and he's more than happy to volunteer his gun and sharp wit to annihilate it. By the way, there's another side to Max's personality that I don't think I've seen explored in other places. So Max is clearly a traumatized individual. Dude found his family massacred, had his best friend gunned down in front of him, and while trying to bring those responsible to justice, he got unwittingly sucked into a conspiracy involving some very powerful and dangerous individuals. It's clear that he'd rather do anything else than shoot dozens of corporate paramilitaries. But as the story progressed, I got the impression that Max kind of revels in his status as vigilante and cleansing agent. Although he'd rather inject himself with a deadly dose of Valkyr than admit to this. He literally compares himself to, quote, a deadly virus released into the city's corrupt circulatory system. If that's not a roundabout way of saying I get off on shooting gangsters in the dick, I don't know what is. Of course, James McCaffrey's talent would have been for nothing if not for the excellent writing. Sam Lake gave him a lot of brilliant writing to chew on. The writing is so evocative and lush in detail that you can feel the sleaze and corrupted evil of this world through Max's narration. And to be perfectly honest with you, I don't blame Max for being so eager to shoot every criminal coming his way. Every single criminal Max encounters is some variation of cruelly sadistic and batshit insane. Meet Jack Lupino, a ruthless capo of the Punchinello crime family who happens to have an obsession with the occult. Jack Lupino isn't just some random mafia capo who happened to become infatuated with the occult in between collecting envelopes of protection money. Nah dude, this fucker is everything suburban moms from the 80s thought Dungeons and Dragons players were. He's into ritualistic killings and owns all sorts of occult books that he references in his demented scribblings. I'm gonna level with you, the prospect of a New York wise guy obsessed with Cthulhu and Beelzebub and other demonic beings is absolutely hilarious. I mean, you can't get more camp than this. For God's sake, his HQ is a goth nightclub called Ragnarok. He believes he is a wolf and a messenger from hell. One time he shot one of his thugs in the head just to see how his brains would look on the wall. He's closer to a Blade villain or some shit than your typical mafioso. How are we supposed to take this guy seriously again? But here's the thing, Jack Lupino didn't go down this road of his own volition. Lupino's, let's say, enthusiasm for everything demonic is a byproduct of his heavy Valkyr abuse. And look, I'm not suggesting that he deserves sympathy, but after witnessing other Valkyr addicts in various states of craziness, I couldn't help but feel a little bit sorry for this poor bastard. Taking him out felt almost like a mercy killing, unlike the other sadistic figures Max encounters. It's also worth mentioning that as bleak as this game can get, Max Payne doesn't shy away from occasionally taking a detour through Camp City. So you're in this sleazy hotel, right, looking to take out this notorious mafia hitman called Rico Muerte, who Max himself paints as a kind of a Kaiser Soze type of criminal, intelligent, ruthless, always one step ahead of the police. Almost invisible. You murder a dozen or so goons, bust a drug deal, your heart pumping with adrenaline in anticipation of confronting a legendary figure of New York's gangland. Barge into the bar where he hangs around and you find him being, entertained by his lady friend, while bragging that he killed two of his men for deciding to solve a dispute by playing a video game instead of fighting like real men. So does he recoil in surprise as a result of being caught in such a vulnerable state? Nah, he immediately gets into a shootout with you, pants down to his ankles. Look, I know I spent the last 10 minutes talking about how bleak this game is, but I think these small silly moments make the truly tragic scenes stand out that much more. I love a good contrast when it's executed with restraint. One moment you're trading quips with heavily accented Sopranos extras, and the next you stumble into a dude who'd been impaled with a wooden stick in a crack house. And Max Payne manages to pull off these tonal shifts masterfully. I couldn't quite forgive myself if I didn't mention some of the enemy conversations and interactions, at least in passing. Because Max Payne is a hectic game that by design encourages players to push forward, a lot of these cool moments get lost in the hail of bullets. I urge you to take the occasional breather and just watch these fucking clowns bicker with each other and collapse under the weight of their own sheer stupidity. Max's narration over the graphic novels is where the writing shines in all of its noir beauty, but in-game, Remedy's writers flexed their comedic muscles.
Red, blue, or green?
It's always red or blue in the movies.
So, green?
No, not the green.
The mature story and noir narrative devices were not the only things that propelled Max Payne to the status of a classic game. In fact, I believe these elements ended up impacting the gaming industry the least, as no game except the sequels attempted to carry forward Max Payne's stylistic legacy. The gameplay and gunplay though made huge waves at release. I wouldn't call the gameplay revolutionary, I try to use that word sparingly, but I don't think it's a stretch to declare that its ripples are still felt today, 20 years after Max Payne hit the store shelves. Max Payne's bullet time effect has a nearly legendary status in the gaming canon. Inspired by Hong Kong cinema, particularly John Woo's classic gangster flicks, the bullet time's purpose was to add a bit of much needed freshness in a genre that was already feeling a tad stale by the early 2000s. Just to get this out of the way, no in-game justification is offered for this ability. The closest thing we get to an explanation is when Max remarks in the sequel that time slows down when you're looking down the barrel of a gun, so bullet time could be explained as a moment of intense concentration, an adrenaline rush making Max hyper aware of his surroundings. Or it could be an effect of him abusing painkillers which slows his perception of time, sleep deprivation, or Max's depression and mental torment caused by the tragic loss of his family. Oh, here's another theory I just pulled out of my ass. Bullet time is actually a visual and mechanical representation of Max's emotional numbness and the fact that he's become desensitized to violence. Who knows. I don't mind that bullet time isn't explained in game, by the way, just something to consider. Anyway, bullet time. So the gameplay revolves almost entirely around the bullet time mechanic. For those of you who have never played Max Payne, it works something like this. When activated, it slows down time, allowing for projectiles to be seen by the naked eye. Although everything around Max slows down, he is still able to react in real time. A core mechanic is Max's iconic shoot dodge, a maneuver which allows him to perform a slow motion dive through the air to avoid enemy fire. These mechanics are pretty simple to grasp, but there's more to them than that. In the first installment, performing a shoot dodge consumes a finite rechargeable resource called adrenaline, indicated right next to the health indicator, and bullet time taps into the same resource pool. This effect, shoot dodging, lasts only about 5 seconds until time resumes flowing as normal. 5 seconds may seem arbitrary, but this time limit eliminates the possibility of the player artificially extending the duration of the slow motion effect by, for example, shoot dodging from higher ground than the enemies, as it ends as soon as Max lands on the ground. Not that levels have a lot of verticality, mind you, but it's good that Remedy thought ahead because it forces players to use it more tactically. For instance, diving forward in front of an enemy that can see you places you directly in their line of fire. The same thing applies to diving backwards. On top of that, Max is forced to rise to his feet at the end of a shoot dodge, meaning that in that 2 or so second interval he is vulnerable to enemy fire. So what you want to do instead is shoot dodging sideways around corners to catch enemies off guard. Ironically, as much of a visual spectacle shoot dodging can be, the design quirks I mentioned earlier have the, I assume, not unintended effect of turning it into a de facto defensive ability meant to be used sparingly. It's not the mayhem causing ability you'd think it is. I suspect Remedy didn't know how to implement it without making it OP, so they chose the middle ground. I don't know, I'm not a game designer. Doesn't stop me from complaining about games though, which is exactly what I'm gonna do now. You see, Max Payne is very old school in its design, and mostly for the worse. Lots of frustrating cheap bullshit that annoyed me to no end. Take this wonderful section where an enemy spawns only when you jump into a cramped space between a wall and a banister. I tried triggering the script by walking against the banister, but it didn't work. But this is an isolated incident. The game has much bigger sins to account for, one of them being the infuriating enemy placement and behavior. Goons waiting for you behind doors with fully loaded shotguns, enemies hidden out of sight, grenades popping up out of nowhere. Okay, let me give you a quick example. So I had to reach the 5th story or whatever of a building. As soon as I entered the hallway preceding the stairs, I was immediately jumped by an enemy. It was a close call, but I dealt with him. I proceeded to go upstairs, saw an enemy, he ran away, threw a grenade which ricocheted from the wall onto the ground at my feet with laser precision and blew me up to oblivion. I'm open to taking part of the blame because had I not instinctively shoot dodged on the stairs when I saw the dude, I might have escaped unharmed. Alright, I quick loaded, dealt with the first guy, dodged the grenade, chased the grenade throwing fuck into the room adjacent to the hallway, and got my face blasted by a shotgun wielding mafioso who popped out from behind a wall. Also, in case you haven't noticed, there's another guy on top of the stairs on my left. Cool. On my third try, I sprinted past the grenade, chased the grenade throwing fuck into the cursed room, killed him and his buddy, stopped for a second to take a deep breath, and then disposed of the other mobster waiting for me on top of the stairs. In a nearby bathroom, I found a medicine cabinet filled with painkillers, as if the designers knew this was bullshit and wanted to apologize. Oh yeah, painkillers serve as medkits in this game, forgot to mention that. Look, I know mistakes happen and that literally every game in existence leans on the occasional cheap design trick to cut corners or whatever. However, Max Payne seems to be designed around them. This incentivizes players to peek around corners, which ruins the flow of the gameplay and destroys the sense of forward momentum the game is supposed to evoke, by virtue of it being about a vigilante who wipes out hundreds of gangsters like a mob exterminator. Okay, enough negativity. I won't even complain about the nightmare sequences. Plenty of other videos have chipped in on this subject. To be completely fair, Max Payne was Remedy's first third-person shooter, and all of those issues have been addressed in the sequel. And hey, once you learn the layout of the levels and enemy placements, that's when that sense of forward momentum I talked about earlier establishes itself and the gameplay blooms. Add to that a wide variety of weapons and the ability to dual-wield some of them, and yeah, you kinda forget about the cheap bullshit. In fact, the gunplay seems to be the most well-balanced aspect of the game. You wouldn't think resource management would play such a big role in a title like Max Payne. This is not the kind of game where you pick up a weapon and steamroll to the end. You'll constantly run out of ammo, which will force you to switch between weapons. The cool factor that the game oozes from all of its pores also helps. Max Payne doesn't have set pieces per se, those will make an appearance way later in Max Payne 3, but some of the setups are pretty amazing. There's one mission set in Don Punchinello's mansion that has you gun down his 3 assassins one by one as you're working your way towards the boss himself. Another revolves around an intense rooftop chase where Max is trying to catch Vinny Gognitti. Lots of cool stuff. And I guess that's a wrap on the Max Payne section of this video. Even though I bitched a lot towards the end, I still think Max Payne is a very solid game that mostly stands up and is worth playing even 20 years later. So let's move on to Max Payne 2. How the hell do you follow up a groundbreaking game like Max Payne? Is something people assumed Remedy would be asking themselves after making Max Payne. And the answer was simple. You keep what was great about the first game, tweak and overhaul what was, well, not so great, and double down on production values. Max Payne 2 takes place 2 years after the events of the first game, which saw Max bringing his quest to avenge his family to fruition. Since then, Max has left the DEA and returned to his old job as a police detective for the NYPD as a hero cop, spending his days catching serial killers and solving the coldest of cold cases. So it seems like things are going pretty swell for our boy Max, right? Surely he won't be drawn into yet another decade-spanning conspiracy involving organized crime, a secret society, and the US government, not 2 years after suffering probably the most traumatic event in his life, right? If your answer was nah, boy do I admire your optimism. In case it wasn't obvious until now, Max has drawn the short straw, so of course he was due for another round of sudden betrayals, getting shot at by highly trained mercenaries, and heartbreak. Fittingly, the story of Max Payne 2 debuts in medias res, long after the shit had already hit the fan. We'll circle back to this a bit later when we get to the section about Max himself. But let's go over the presentation first. It's a big step up over the last game. First, Remedy brought professional actor Timothy Gibbs to model for Max Payne. Scratch that, all the characters got the professional actor treatment. So no more goofy, constipated faces, it's all pristine now, cutscenes included, which this time around complement the graphic novels instead of sticking out like a sore thumb. The graphic novels got an almost total overhaul as well. While in the first game the graphic novel cutscenes were a means to an end, meaning a low-budget plot-pushing device, for Max Payne 2 Remedy has fully embraced them as a pillar of the series' visual language and aesthetic. As such, a lot more attention has been invested in areas that are not necessarily plot relevant, such as setting the scene and mood. Here's an example. This brief 2-panel long scene showing Jim Bravura, the deputy chief of the NYPD, swallowing a fistful of painkillers. It's far from being plot relevant, but it does a great job revealing some background context that could help us understand this secondary character without taking the spotlight from the main players. You wouldn't see these kinds of intimate vignettes in the first game, because it was a lot more economic and pragmatic with its panel usage. As a, let's say, casual comic book enjoyer, I appreciated this direction and Remedy's newfound focus on mood and atmosphere. The soft, dark jazz playing gently in the background, panels devoid of any dialogue pushing players to fill in the gaps with their imagination, lots of ambient sounds to complement Max's narration, which is somehow even more packed with metaphors and hard-boiled grit.
Home, sweet home. Something in the night felt like a door had been opened, an echo of the past, an old monster snapping its eyes open in the depths of my brain. Closing your eyes forces you to look at the darkness inside.
And now, address unknown.
I hadn't slept in a long time. When I did, my dreams were nightmares. I needed to talk to Vlad, get his version, be the bearer of bad news on Annie Finn. Vlad had bought the old Ragnarok nightclub. He was renovating it into a trendy restaurant, Vodka. Mona's appearance had triggered a dislocation, schizophrenia. I felt elation, but with it, fear that all the past evils had come along for the ride. When you're waking up, the world is a blur. What was clear in a dream suddenly makes no sense. No surreal rescues, no easy, magic way out. But you are awake. I had wanted to be punished for what I had done, but Alfred Woden had kept his word. With his influence, ridiculously, I had emerged from my history of violence unscathed. A hero. I didn't thank him. I couldn't stomach it. I left the DEA.
Once again, our boy and Sex and the City alumni James McCaffrey returns to bring life to the cop-turned-vigilante once again, Max Payne. What can I say that I haven't said in the previous section? Voice, pacing, line delivery, dude's incredible, and once again Remedy gave him some equally incredible writing to chew on. Now Remedy could have just as easily followed the template of Max Payne 1, churn out another vigilante story and people would still have probably loved it. But for Max Payne 2, Sam Lake and his team of writers decided to take a different approach. This game is a love story first, as my fellow YouTuber Arkham put it in his Max Payne 2 retrospective, which you should totally watch, and action thriller second. The intro of the sequel shows a broken Max holding onto the body of Mona Sachs as the police are moving in to make their arrest, during what looks to be the aftermath of the final shootout. As you might not remember from earlier in the video because I tiptoed around explaining the gist with Mona to avoid spoilers, Mona was a contract killer slash Max's love interest who was presumed dead by the end of the first game's story. By the second game she somehow survived and resumed her assassin job and relationship with Max. And as the opening seconds of Max Payne 2 show, this doesn't end well for either of them. Their context, that's all you're getting from me. Anyway, this is a huge shift in direction and tone over the first game, whose intro showed a satisfied Max surrendering himself to the police after avenging his family. Max Payne 2 makes it clear from the very beginning that this story has no happy ending. Only pain. I'm serious, hear me out. This change in direction becomes clearer once you stop and think about the dynamic between Max and the story and the world. In the first game, the focus was less on Max himself and more on the world as seen and interpreted by Max as he cleansed it of evil and corruption. Max was a one-man army with nothing to lose and one simple goal: destroy the people responsible for his family's death and kill everybody standing in the way. To put it simply, he was a purely reactive force fueled by rage. But what happens after the man with nothing to lose succeeds and actually lives to tell the tale? What does life after vigilantism look like? Can one even have a normal life after what Max went through? These are some of the questions that Max Payne 2 poses. Consequently, the writing is more introspective and philosophical than ever and depicts a vulnerable and obvious obviously traumatized Max Payne, trying to cope with his family's tragic demise while tackling yet another life-shattering crisis at the same time. As evocative as Max's narration is about his mental torment and traumas, Remedy still went the extra mile and decided to also show it through other means, namely his apartment. Yes, you probably know from my Humor Evolution review how much I love overly analyzing fictional living spaces. I couldn't find any official design-related sources to lean on for my analysis, so I'm just gonna plainly state that it's bad. Like, holy shit, nothing screams depression louder than mounds of pizza boxes rotting on the sofa and a big fucking hole in your bathroom wall. And this toilet paper roll on the living room floor. Oh, what about this amp surrounded by CDs? Did he drunkenly pull it out one night to switch some cables around and then just immediately forget about it? Yeah, our boy Max is going through some shit. A traumatized man who, in his view, has nothing to live for. He may be capable of eradicating an entire criminal syndicate in the span of a few nights, but nothing in his training prepared him to deal with survivor's guilt. The true extent of Max's fragile mental state is revealed not by the state of his apartment, but by playing a couple of phone recordings in the apartment of the assassin that had been spying on him. One of them, from Jim Bravura, foreshadows Max's descent into alcoholism and substance abuse, which we'll see more of in Max Payne 3. The other is both embarrassing, sad, and funny at the same time. It's basically Max calling a hotline and pressing free to talk to Mona and awkwardly apologizing for freaking her out with his hard-boiled noir monologue. It's yeah, so the next time you're cringing for drunk dialing an ex the night before, think about this scene, maybe it'll make you feel better. It didn't work for me. So Remedy did a great job with fleshing out Max's psychology, but what about the setting? Any juicy examples of tight world building that only Remedy could pull off? Oh yes, plenty. I'm gonna show you just one cool detail that I haven't seen mentioned in other videos. But first we gotta talk about the main antagonistic group in Max Payne 2. While the first game had Max wipe out literally hundreds of 2-bit mobsters, in the sequel Max goes against a more unassuming and devious enemy. The Squeaky Cleaning Company. Don't be too quick with the Big Lebowski connections. These guys do way more than steal rugs that tie the room together. No, the cleaners, as they are commonly known, are a business that specializes in cleaning jobs, meaning they kill people and then wipe out any sign of their existence, as if a black hole materialized there, as one of these fine gentlemen put it. As a side note, a very interesting piece of reactivity occurs when you first encounter this group. In the first mission, Max stumbles into one of these cleaners after responding to a 911 call reporting some gunshots in a warehouse. The cleaner, wearing the group's unassuming overalls, offers to lead Max to the source of the gunshots. If Max follows the cleaner, he is led into an ambush. If Max guns down the cleaner proactively, he plainly remarks that he saw it coming from a mile away. It's a very cool, easily missable detail. Anyway, so these guys cornered a very specific niche of the home cleaning market. As it so happens, they've been tasked with eliminating a loyalist wing of the Inner Circle during Max Payne 2. A later mission has you infiltrating an upscale residential complex in the midst of being scrubbed clean by the cleaners. So here's what's cool about this mission. Not only does it offer a glimpse behind the curtains and reveal how a normal day at the office looks like for these guys, you also see how they operate. As you work your way through the building and gun down dozens of goons and probably 3 levels of their management, you get to see crime scenes in varying states of cleanliness. This dude here was a fresh kill and they never got the chance to work their magic because, well, you just threw a big rusty wrench in their plans. With this one they were somewhere in between stages, as proven by the various cleaning utensils laying around. Mops, buckets of water, and canisters of what I assume is bleach. And then, at the end of the mission, you enter an apartment that has been consumed by the metaphorical black hole I mentioned earlier. These guys don't fuck around. When they say they're gonna wipe any trace of your existence, they mean it. On that same note, in Max Payne 2, Remedy did an even better job fleshing out these antagonistic factions. Again, in a game where enemies are effectively disposable bullet magnets, Remedy wasn't in any way obligated to bother with this stuff. To insert these brief moments that elevate these goons beyond just ones and zeros that you gun down without thinking. Like the cleaner playing the piano for a full minute and then awkwardly clearing his voice, as if it was a spur of the moment decision made while he was supposed to be working that his coworkers didn't have the heart to interrupt, or the Italian-American gangsters having a heart-to-heart conversation about romantic relationships. I felt so bad for killing them. My favorite moment by far involves Max commending the cleaners for their cold efficiency, to which Mona replies that it doesn't seem that way from where she's standing. Later, when you play the exact same mission but from Mona's perspective, you see what she meant.
Mona, these guys are packing. Close to overkill. Hardcore professionals.
Doesn't seem that way from where I'm standing.
Woohoo! Shake it, baby, shake it! One look at the boss, and bam! The Ice Queen goes like this. She wants him bad.
Oh, yeah.
Work it, baby, work it! Yeah, funny stuff.
Right.
You are so stupid.
Things.
In terms of gameplay, Max Payne 2 is an improvement over the original in every possible way. The controls feel very tight, the bullshit enemy placement is thankfully gone, and overall Remedy ditched the old school shooter philosophy the predecessor was designed around. To say that Max Payne 2's gameplay holds up almost 20 years later would be a gross understatement. I'd go so far as to say it's technically mechanically ageless, because while playing Max Payne 2 I haven't had a single moment where I went, well, you know, it's 20 years old, what are you gonna do? First, let's address the changes to bullet time. I wouldn't necessarily say Remedy changed bullet time across the two games, rather they shaved off the rough edges and added a few quality of life tweaks. For starters, shoot dodging feels way more fluid and seamless. Leaping forward or backwards is not an automatic death sentence anymore, because Max can now continue shooting when crashing on the ground instead of automatically rising to his feet. The bullet time mode itself is almost identical to the one found in the first game, with one major difference. If Max guns down several enemies at once while bullet time is active, the hourglass will turn yellow, causing Max to move faster while making time flow even slower. This can have the unintended effect of making the game quite easy, but I think the sheer visual spectacle this offers compensates for the lowered difficulty. Also, the screen color changes to a sepia tone when bullet time is active, which I think is a better visual cue than the slight blur of the first game. Before I forget, and by the way I totally forgot I squeezed this paragraph in after finishing the script, Max Payne 2 introduced a new reload animation which triggers when Max reloads while in bullet time. Basically, if Max reloads while bullet time is activated, he ducks and pulls this Tony Hawk's Pro Skater spin. While researching this video, I discovered that the spin's purpose is not there just for show. It's meant to offer the player a brief moment of respite to survey the combat situation and think of a strategy. Of course, I never used it as it was intended, unless reaching for my pint to take another sip of beer while Max does his new metal routine can be regarded as thinking of a strategy, which I'm sure it can't. In the section dedicated to the original game, I mentioned that despite the visual spectacle bullet time provides, it's still an inherently defensive tool that should be used as sparingly as possible. Well, the introduction of the filling hourglass mechanic, as well as Max's newfound ability to lay on the ground after crashing, make bullet time a downright offensive ability. Unlike Max Payne 1, the sequel wants players to lunge at enemies and put themselves in risky situations. Truth be told, the sooner you unlearn the habits internalized from the first game, the better. Playing Max Payne 2 defensively will put you at a major disadvantage, as the AI is more than capable of executing flanking maneuvers. Plus, the newly introduced Havoc physics engine can render cover useless, as a grenade or even a few bullets can make the boxes you've so cleverly hidden behind topple over. Speaking of which, Havoc is one of the reasons why the combat feels so fluid and cinematic. Remedy tweaked the engine to make weapons and projectiles interact with the environment more naturally, enemies included, whose death animations now follow the laws of physics instead of a preset number of animations. This is some pretty advanced stuff for 2003, man. I really enjoyed playing around with the physics and uncovering secret stashes of supplies. But bullet time is not the only mechanic that went through some changes. The gunplay has also been vastly improved. Resource management doesn't play as big of a role this time around, as the game is pretty generous with ammo and health supplies. I both liked and disliked this aspect in Max Payne 1. I enjoyed it because it forced me to use Max's entire arsenal, and switching between weapons on the go conferred the gameplay with a very satisfying sense of fluidity and urgency. Like in, say, action movies where you see the protagonist tossing one weapon after another like tissues. On the other hand, I really enjoyed shooting the Desert Eagle, and the fact that I was constantly running out of ammo for it filled me with a visceral feeling of frustration. I don't know, I have a thing for handguns in video games. Assault rifles are so uncivilized. That's no longer the case in Max Payne 2. You can technically stick to a couple of weapons as long as you do your best to aim for the head. And the cherry on top, you can dual wield Desert Eagles. Neat. The level design is just as good in Max Payne 2. In fine Max Payne tradition, you'll be mowing down mobsters and mercenaries in some pretty unsavory places. I already praised the upscale apartment complex as a highlight, but I also want to give a shout out to Vodka, the ex-Ragnarok club, which is in the process of being reconverted into a fancy restaurant by who else? Mob boss Vladimir Lem, and the Bronx Project, a former hangout for Valkyr junkies that is now the epicenter of a mob war between the Italians and the Russians. And how could I forget about the missions where you play as Mona Sachs? They're a textbook example on how to make sniper escort missions. Why is that phrase so hard to say? Also, the nightmare sequences. Huge improvement. No more bullshit platforming and endless mazes. Remedy took the feedback for Max Payne 1 to heart and focused on integrating them into the narrative.
What? What? I'm a collector. Do you know how much this stuff is worth? I tell you, fucking much. Nothing nerdy about it. I'm a collector.
It's the jacket!
Remarkably, Max Payne 2's level design shines not during the action-packed missions, but in the ones where nothing notable actually happens. Those of you who have played Max Payne 2 know exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, the Address Unknown Funhouse. Oh man, I love this mission. Okay. A little context. The Address Unknown Funhouse is a now abandoned tourist attraction located in Coney Island. It's based on a formerly popular in-universe TV show that has fallen into obscurity since its cancellation in the mid-90s. Naturally, the cancellation of the show brought about its closure, though for some reason the props are fully functional. I'm surprised it hasn't been scrapped for parts by Valkyr addicts. Anyway, everything inside is related to the show. It's basically one giant spoiler in the form of interior design, as the building is designed to reflect the journey of the show's main character, and you, the player, get to experience the show's plot through these lovingly designed props. The funhouse is made to resemble those Halloween-themed amusement rides that were almost endearing in their cheapness. You don't fire a single shot during this level, by the way. It's a short mood piece meant to offer the player some breathing room and to develop Max as a character, because of course he talks to himself constantly during this level, and of course this in-universe TV show mirrors Max's life experience to some degree. What, you thought Remedy put this in the game just for shits and giggles? Nah son, this segment is a meta-commentary inside a meta-commentary, and I'm definitely not smart enough to give it a proper analysis, so I'm just gonna stop here. Another palette cleansing section takes place in Max's police station. The context for its existence is that Bravura, who got rightfully tired of Max's bullshit, has assigned him to desk work for the foreseeable future. Players are free to explore the station before tackling the main objective. Have Max write a report on last night's events. You know, I'm visualizing an alternate reality where at this pivotal point in the story, players are given the option to continue down this path and turn Max Payne 2 into a narrative-driven police sim in the vein of This Is the Police. Anyway, I definitely encourage you to poke around and listen to the conversations. The Reservoir Dogs homage had me in stitches. And that's a wrap on Max Payne 2. Even though it's not my favorite of the series for entirely subjective and personal reasons, I can totally see why most people regard it as the peak of the franchise. It's more tonally and narratively cohesive, and the gameplay, despite the game being nearly 20 years old, has barely aged. So let's move on to the final game, Max Payne 3.
It was Monday afternoon, and I'd already been thrown out of a party, gone to a strip club, and got into a bar fight. This latest midlife crisis was certainly ticking all the boxes.
Max Payne 3 picks up 9 or so years after the second entry. Max, now a retired NYPD detective, has devolved from a suave, handsome vigilante with a slight drinking problem to a full-blown middle-aged alcoholic with anger issues who spends his days popping painkillers and emptying bottles of cheap booze in New Jersey dive bars. It's quite a transition that the game makes a point out of showing in all of its ugliness. Unlike Max Payne 1 and 2, where Max's substance abuse was implied but never shown explicitly. More on that later. Anyway, after an incident in a Hoboken dive bar which forces Max to leave New York for good, an event that we'll also cover later in the video, Max accepts an offer from Raul Passos, whom he met during that incident, to become a private security contractor for a wealthy Brazilian family based in Sao Paulo. The Branco family, whom Max must shield from the consequences of being inhumanly disgustingly rich, consists of Rodrigo Branco, a wealthy real estate mogul, Fabiana Branco, Rodrigo's young wife, Victor Branco, a local politician, and Marcelo Branco, an airheaded, shallow, hard-partying socialite and also Victor and Rodrigo's youngest brother. So you could say that Max is the luckiest bastard alive. From being marked for death in New York to a low-effort, presumably outrageously well-paid gig in a tropical country where all he has to do is dress nice and guard rich assholes at fundraisers. The best part, he can drink on the job for free. It certainly beats drinking himself to death in moldy Hoboken dive bars. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything. Once again, Max is pulled into a deadly conspiracy, this time consisting of shadowy factions, politics, local gangs and right-wing militias, with the Branco family front and center. A conspiracy which, of course, got rolling only a few months into Max's tenure. In Max Payne 1, he took to eradicating New York's gangland to avenge his family. Max Payne 2 was all about Mona. In Max Payne 3, his boss's trophy wife gets kidnapped by some local hoods. An incident which triggers a chain of events that leads to Max being hunted by drug traffickers, a fictional corrupt police force modeled after Brazil's own Bope and Gate, and right-wing militias. So now he finds himself in the unenviable position of having to tackle forces deadlier than he had ever faced, at the behest of a group he has absolutely no personal connection with, apart from the wire transfers funding his alcoholism and drug abuse. And Hawaiian shirts. That's basically the gist of Max Payne 3, a glitzy, ultra-violent, neo-noir crime thriller about a middle-aged alcoholic battling the corrupt power structures of a country he doesn't understand, which also touches on politics, systemic corruption, the excesses of the 1%, and the disparity between the rich and the poor. If you think this is quite the tonal and thematic shift from 1 and 2, I don't blame you. But I also respectfully disagree. Some of you may not remember this, but Max Payne 3 got an insane amount of backlash when Rockstar announced that the setting will be moved from New York to Brazil. Obviously, I'm not gonna dig through 14-year-old message boards for examples, but the main concern was that Max Payne 3's South American setting was somehow incompatible with noir, as if the climate and location of the setting dictate whether or not a work of fiction is noir. Never mind that literally dozens of noir pieces of fiction considered masterpieces of the genre are set in locations with a very distinct lack of shitty weather and New York skylines. Anyway, I'm not here to delve into the specifics of what makes a piece of media qualify for the noir label. I'm sure there are more knowledgeable people out there who could do a better job than me. I'm far from being a media critic or an academic. What I will say though is that nearly all the narrative devices and elements present in Max Payne 3 point in that direction. I'm aware I might be wasting my breath on this issue because people have come around to the idea that Max Payne 3 isn't as big of a thematic departure from the originals as contemporaneous reviews said it was, but I still felt I needed to give my 3 cents. 3 cents because I'm so late to the party my metaphorical 2 cents became 3 due to inflation. Max Payne's 3 noir pedigree is reinforced through its presentation. Rockstar, that is pre-GTA Online Rockstar, are known for their obsession for genre cinema and invoking it into their games. Naturally, Max Payne 3 takes a lot of cues from neo-noir cinema. Films like Michael Mann's Manhunter and Heat, Tony Scott's Men on Fire, and most relevantly, Jose Padilla's Elite Squad series and Fernando Meireles' Cidade de Deus. This is not just me flexing my surface level film knowledge. Okay, maybe a little bit. My point is that knowing Rockstar's sources of inspiration helped me appreciate what the studio did with Max Payne 3 from a stylistic perspective even more. Like, for example, the seamless transitions between action segments and cutscenes. Look, I know they're a trick to hide loading screens, but I'd be lying if I said they didn't get my heart pumping. Their frequency was one of the biggest criticism directed at Max Payne 3, but honestly I didn't find them that disruptive. Another point of contention at release was the absence of graphic novels. Now I'll be real with you, I was part of that crowd. But during my latest playthrough, I understood why Rockstar decided to drop them. The graphic novels just wouldn't mesh well with the kind of story and pacing they went for, so a compromise had to be made. During cutscenes, snippets of phrases from Max's narration and dialogue will pop up on the screen both to provide emphasis and guide players through the story. I really love this gimmick. I'm a firm believer in the mantra that the way a story is presented is just as important as the story itself. Another interesting stylistic decision is the heavy use of the blur effect. I assume it's meant to provide cutscenes with a cinematic feeling and emphasize Max's sense of disorientation. I'm in two minds about this. On the one hand, I like its narrative implications and how it evokes Max's sense of confusion, on account of being constantly shot at in a foreign country that he doesn't understand, while nursing his excruciating hangover and later alcohol withdrawal symptoms. On the other hand, I have to admit that the blur is a bit overused and wears out its welcome over time. However, I'm all for game developers experimenting with narrative devices, and being slightly inconvenienced by an overused blur effect is a cost I'm willing to pay. Speaking of disorientation, a small detail that I liked is the shaky camera when Max investigates clues. It's as if Max's head is spinning from all the chaos he's experienced and he's trying to catch his breath. Moving on, let's briefly touch on the musical score. Now, I haven't mentioned the soundtracks of the previous two games, mainly because they've been discussed to death and I was saving my writing juices for the third entry. Max Payne 3's soundtrack is probably the biggest quote-unquote stylistic departure from the originals. In this game, Max is in a darker place, both mentally and geographically, and the soundtrack needed to reflect that. The melancholic ambient pieces just wouldn't cut it anymore. They needed a band that could capture the vibe of this world as well as Max's degrading mental state. In that sense, they brought Los Angeles-based noise rock band What the fuck?
Okay, listen here, fucksticks. Sorry for calling you a fuckstick. We gotta talk about the soundtrack. The score of Max Payne 3 was composed by Los Angeles noise rock band Health, whose work I've been kind of a fan of. Not like a big super fan, but someone who's a bit invested in the band's endeavors, you know, just like a casual frickin' dude. Yeah, I feel like it's worth mentioning that it's their work on this wonderful game here that made me fall in love with everything they've ever done, really. From twitchy, noisy punkisms, to twitchy, noisy electronicsisms, to moody, atmospheric ballads that sound like Health. They are a band with a unique, one-of-a-kind sound, really. One that can be pummelingly aggressive or melancholically beautiful. They bend genre conventions and create idiosyncratic soundscapes through the use of guitars that become absolutely unrecognizable under the multitude of effects that have been just piled on top of them. Whenever someone asks me to describe their music, the first thing that comes to mind is cinematic, however. They are impeccable at building atmosphere, mainly due to how gigantic and strange their effect-heavy guitar work sounds. Rockstar were onto something when they reached out to the band, and you'll know what I mean as soon as you hear their first piece in game. When I listen to Health, I have a few adjectives in mind that I associate with the music. Sharp, jagged, piercing, dissonant, perfectly fitting for the disgusting, filthy world that Rockstar has dreamt up for Max's final adventure, where you're treading through decrepit buildings, trampling through broken glass, or walking into seedy brothels and shooting up locales in which you were to be decimated but still survived somehow. In a place you don't belong. The music in quieter moments offers a haunting backdrop of wailing, distorted guitars that quietly shriek in the background. Even in cases like that, there is a sense of abnormality to them, like in the off-key sounding melody for Torture that just sounds like a broken man trying to come to terms with a life ruined by traumatic. One of the key components of Health's unique sound is definitely their skillfulness at mixing different genre conventions and their aesthetic into a coherent whole. The song Future captures this wonderfully, as it sounds like the band is trying their hands at making trip-hop that's a reverb-heavy, gigantic-sounding, dissonant piece of beautiful melancholy. Many of the tracks are ambient pieces that manage to melt into this haze of colors and Max's drug and alcohol-fueled fever dream of a trip, washing over you like a sea of sad sounds, complementing the vivid, broken, and disorienting visuals showcased during cinematics. The accompanying drums feel echoey, cold and machine-like, creating a sense of detachment that fits Max's journey through the frozen streets of New Jersey, for
Could
example.
have been setting me up for a fall. Something told me to stay put and trust him.
In stark contrast with Brazil, where the music feels busy, with shakers and tribal-like percussion that still has B.J. Miller's mechanical machine gun delivery. The calculated coldness of it is still there, and it contrasts wonderfully with the liveliness of the other instruments at play. The band also doesn't shy away from assaulting you with industrial noises that are distorted and stretched to fucking hell, making me wonder when they are going to dabble in scoring a horror game or a film now that I think about it. A prime example of this is the song Guns, where they lay down this horrifying noise that sounds like heavy machinery cutting a piece of steel that screams out of agony over a drum beat that just won't let up, adding to the tension even further. Haunting atmospheres in your Max Payne game? Check. Achieved through the use of drawn-out synth pads, pummeling drums, and throbbing, disgusting noises that make you feel like something horrific is behind the corner, slowly lumbering towards you in this decrepit abandoned building that has deeply troubling dealings going on. But Mark, please put some footage of this place here, you know what I'm saying, my bucko tech. Helf's crowning achievement is definitely the song Tears, however, the one that accompanies you during a section of the game's final mission. It's one of the few cuts that include vocals and also lyrics that tie into the story in a rather clever way. As much as I adore songs like Combat Drugs with its punchy, repetitive drum beats and dissonant guitar melody that offer the perfect canvas for your shootouts to visually unfold, everything builds up to Tears, which is one of the band's magnum opuses. Magnum opuses? Magnum opus? Latin is weird. It features vocal work from Jake Dujic, and his androgynous, haunting vocals tie the experience together. A repetitive, distorted noise loop, echoey drums, a shrieking, crying, festering melody, and a disembodied voice that urges a weathered, guilt-ridden mess of a man to finally move on, all come together to form something uniquely beautiful. People give shit to Helf about their lyrics, but I think they're fucking great. And I think begging Max to let go, juxtaposed to Time to Let Me Never Let Go and You'll Die Alone, is genius-level meta-narrative shit that not only encapsulates the gist of Max's inner conflicts and struggles through the entire series by highlighting how he has to let go of events that he's incapable of even accepting, but also offers a sense of catharsis in the final half an hour of the game. My only problem with this song is that it's not played long enough throughout the final level, really. I think it could have been built up in a more interesting way and would have deserved a bit more airtime, but that's besides the point. It's a mix of tragic but also hopefully melancholic with a name that's probably the most fitting in the entire soundtrack. Because that's what it gets out of me no matter how many times I end up hearing it in the airport level or when frickin' Spotify slam dunks on me with some moody jams. I adore what Health created, and without them, Max Payne 3 would definitely be a lot less impactful and aesthetically cohesive to me.
This kind of place made me want to puke. I needed a real drink to deal with the electronic music.
I can see why people would dislike the quote-unquote change in aesthetic Rockstar pulled with the third game, but honestly, I think the band maintained the level of darkness that has been permeating from Max Payne since our titular protagonist entered his home on that horrible night. Some of the tracks in the original kinda had that same sort of wailing in the background type soundscape to them, so I don't necessarily think that what the dudes had pulled changed any aspect of the atmosphere or vibe. Their work sounds like an update more like, an attempt at modernizing and recontextualizing something pre-existent. In a way that I don't think many have done before. Overall, soundtrack good. It also has a song from the band's second album, Get Color. It has a really cool, noisy melodic dynamic to it. It sounds tasty, absolutely recommended. It's beautiful, it's sad. Sorry I'm fangirling, I guess, but the soundtrack is important because it not only gave Health the means to kickstart their soundtrack game, but also to grow as artists, resulting in their third album, Death Magic, becoming a lot punchier and more cutting edge through their experience with this soundtrack here. Since then, they have been making collaboration albums, releasing remix albums since the beginning actually. Also, their fourth album kinda brought them into a more gothy direction after a more nihilistic dance music sounding fucking masterpiece. Come Health. Feel nothing. Condoms.
Well, that was weird. The thing that glues all of these things together is, of course, Max's narration, skillfully performed by the legendary James McCaffrey. When he's not filling gang members and right-wing militias with lead, Max is constantly contributing witty observations about whatever he encounters. The excesses and depravity of the rich he was hired to protect, the violence of the favelas, electronic music, and, most importantly, the sorry state he's in. And to think Rockstar were considering changing the actor, thank God they came to their senses. James McCaffrey is Max Payne. However, it's worth mentioning that this version of Max Payne is not as quick to dish out convoluted hard-boiled metaphors every time something crosses his view. Max is just as clever as he was back in the day, but now he cuts to the chase. No more comparing himself to a modern version of Humphrey Bogart or anything like that. This is the perfect occasion to take stock of Max's life. To say Max hit rock bottom would be an understatement. Now, there's a general tendency in pop culture to not necessarily romanticize, though there's plenty of examples in that regard, but take some artistic liberties when it comes to depicting substance abuse. Like a, cokehead alcoholic action hero with the stamina and physique of a person who bench presses his living room furniture every morning before breakfast. Rockstar didn't go on that route. Literally, the first cutscene shows an aging and unkempt Max stumbling through his apartment and breaking shit in an alcohol-fueled rage. It's not a pretty sight. Seeing Max in this state felt like catching up with an old friend who was already going through some shit years before you lost contact. One mission specifically offers a very unflattering glimpse into Max's post-Max Payne 2 pre-Brazil life. This one starts with Max Payne drinking his sorrows in a dingy Hoboken bar, and it seems like this has been his main activity since silently retiring from the police force at the end of Max Payne 2, possibly at Jim Bravura's suggestion to avoid being implicated in a political scandal. With no criminal syndicate to eradicate, let alone a job to keep his mind occupied, Max was left to boil in his misery and regrets alone. A small but significant indicator of how much Max has lost his edge is that he's living just a couple of blocks away from a chop shop operated by the mafia.
These chumps have been chopping up cars around the corner from my apartment for the last year. The ex-cop in me clocked it months ago, but the deadbeat in me didn't give a shit.
He's pretty much a bloated, cynical, miserable caricature of his former self. So much so that he's become the butt of all jokes for local hoods. Not just any hoods, mind you, but the crew of Tony DeMarco, the son of the boss of the up-and-coming DeMarco crime family, who is at war with, you guessed it, the Punchinellos, who Max mopped the floor with less than a decade prior. So you'd think this snotty piece of shit would know better than to mess with the guy who is solely responsible for creating the power vacuum that helped his family rise through the ranks of the underworld in the first place. By this point, Max should be a boogeyman mafiosos invoked to keep their baby wise guys in line. But no, of course he had to harass a woman in front of Max. Had he resorted to just, I don't know, giving Max wedgies, he would not have gotten his dick shot off, causing his dad to launch a manhunt during which hundreds of his men died, and Max escaped scot-free to Brazil anyway. I'd be surprised if they had enough people to collect protection money by the next morning, let alone launch a mob war. Let's see, what's the average number of members a mafia family has these days? Yup, functionally extinct. Should have stuck to running garbage, fuckos. But Max's struggle with addiction is not just flavor. I mentioned earlier that just like in the previous games, Max was a victim of the old wrong place at the wrong time. That's not entirely true here. You see, Max shares the blame for the mess the Bronco family got themselves in. He is so bad at his job. If by some miracle he doesn't clock in already hungover to shit, Max inevitably rushes to the bar with the grace of a cartoon character floating towards the source of a delicious smell. I feel like Rockstar deserves some praise for not turning Max's struggle with addiction into a gimmick meant to convert his character with an artificial sense of edge, and actually making it an integral part of the story. There's no disconnect between his addiction, the main plot, and what you actually do in the game. Well, mostly. This makes the moment Max swears off the bottle all the more powerful. He didn't have to shave his head though. For one, the symbolism of this act felt kinda on the nose. Second, call me crazy, but no dude pushing 50 in his right mind with a full set of hair showing no signs of balding would shave it on a whim. Like, come on. Max, buddy, pal, bro, fam, I know your liver is on life support, but come on, you don't have to go all Breaking Bad on us. I can hook you up with my barber, you know. I'm sure we can find a perfectly suitable, washed up, pushing 50 action hero who quits alcohol to redeem himself and fix all the shit he's caused haircut. Whatever.
Jesus, what a fucking creep.
Out of all the games in the franchise, Max Payne 3 feels the smoothest to play. I know that's an unfair assessment to make given the time that passed between the titles, but that's just the reality of it. So, did Rockstar manage to capture the spirit of the originals? I'd say yes. For starters, Max Payne feels smoother to control than ever. You can aim down sights by pressing right click, jump over obstacles, sprint and roll. Max Payne 3 also saw the introduction of a cover system, allowing the player to hide behind objects, lean out and blind fire. Cover did play an important role in the previous games, but it never materialized in an actual fleshed out mechanic until now. Max is an out of shape alcoholic pushing 50, so obviously the slight awkwardness with which he performs those actions is reflected in the animations. However, Rockstar managed to strike a balance between integrating Max's advanced age and poor physique into the gameplay and convenience. His joints may crack audibly when shoot dodging, but Max hasn't lost his edge. Speaking of which, boy does it feel good to shoot dodge in this game. The physics engine Rockstar used for Max Payne 3 goes a long way to conferring Max's movements with a very pronounced sense of physicality. I love how he briefly bends his knees in preparation to lunging towards his enemies, and you really feel the full force of the impact when he crashes on the ground. So much so that on a few occasions I instinctively checked myself for any broken ribs. Yeah, you heard me right, that's precisely why I don't enjoy VR games. Bullet time has also been slightly tweaked and modernized. In Max Payne 3, bullet time is charged by injuring and killing enemies. The more elaborate Max's choreography, the bigger the rewards. Notably, Adrenaline, the resource pool that bullet time uses, can charge slowly when Max takes damage or is attacked when hiding behind cover. Having your health depleted is not an automatic death sentence in Max Payne 3 thanks to a system called Last Man Standing. When Last Man Standing is triggered, Max automatically enters bullet time, giving him several seconds to take out the enemy that delivered the killing blow. If Max succeeds in gunning down said enemy, Max recovers a large chunk of his health, at the cost of his entire entire adrenaline pool and one painkiller. This is a cool mechanic on paper, but it has its problems. If the enemy who dealt the killing blow is out of reach, say behind cover, and or Max runs out of bullets right before he enters last man standing, you are forced to watch the entire sequence play out with no option to skip it until Max inevitably succumbs to his wounds. This might not seem like a big deal, but trust me, it adds up. It would have been cool if the game let you reload or at least switch to a weapon of a similar caliber while in last man standing. As it stands, pun totally intended, it's just an interesting mechanic that could have used a bit more work and thought put into it. The coolest addition is what the game calls bullet time sequences. These are essentially bullet time centric action set pieces that trigger after certain checkpoints. Throughout their duration, Max gets unlimited bullet time to kill enemies. And oh my god, they're so fucking cool! Like holy mother of god. Say what you will about Rockstar, but they are the masters at choreographing blood pumping action set pieces. Remember when I gushed at Max Payne 2 for letting me dual-wield Desert Eagles? Well, in Max Payne 3 you can dual-wield the pistol and the submachine gun at the same time. This is my way of saying the gunplay too feels absolutely incredible, whether you're shooting handguns or rifles. Add some decently destructible environments to the equation and you're in for a... I actually ran out of ways to describe how good the gunplay feels, so I'm gonna switch registers and complain about the weapon limit. But just for a bit, as I don't feel it's that big of a deal. See, unlike the previous games in the series, Max can only hold 3 weapons at a time. Basically, there are 2 slots for one-handed weapons and 1 slot for a two-handed weapon. If the player chooses to dual-wield one-handed weapons, Max drops the two-handed weapon on the ground. Otherwise, Max holds the two-handed weapon under his arm. I like this gimmick in theory as it evokes that action hero tossing weapons as they go thing I mentioned previously. The logistics of reloading 2 one-handed weapons while in the heat of battle is also satisfyingly depicted through the animations. But man, I don't think this is the right game for this kind of realism. I respect and understand what you're trying to achieve here, but I'd much rather have my unlimited weapon slots, thank you very much. In the rare moments you're not blowing heads off and stumbling into walls, you can poke around and investigate clues to get some more of that Max's sweet hard-boiled wit. James McCaffrey is a pleasure to listen to. I could listen to him narrating the most mundane shit in my life and never get bored. Like, I don't know, say he sees me ironing my work shirts one gloomy Sunday afternoon, and he compares it to society collapsing under the weight of its own corrupt institutions, I don't know, while sipping knowingly from a glass of neat whiskey or whatever the fuck. My point is, just take some time to explore. Even the simple act of picking up a painkiller will trigger a unique line written specifically for that moment. Hang around an area too much and Max will give you a nudge in the right direction in the form of a monologue. So that's Max Payne 3. In my opinion, it does a great job at sticking to the roots of the series while going in a new direction. The gunplay is great, the story is captivating, and Max is as witty and cynical as ever. I'm officially out of things to say about this game, so you know the drill.
Electronic music.
This video was a lot of fucking work. I initially planned to drop it around Christmas as a present for you guys, but the video got delayed due to some real life factors out of my control, which included one hell of a COVID scare that thankfully proved to be a false alarm. Anyway, I know I should have used this section to wrap up my thoughts on the games I just covered, but I wanted to do something different, something even more important. To thank you guys for sticking with me for the past year and watching and enjoying my shit. 2021 has been an incredible year for the channel. I hit 1000 subs, got monetized, and more notably fully transitioned from short reviews to long form content. This would not have been possible without your kind words and support. So thank you so much, and here's to an even better 2022. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.
There it was, the soundtrack to my life. And, for a few seconds, came harmony. Finally.